July 1809, the South China Sea. The air is thick, almost breathable, with the suffocating stench of burning pine, sulfur, and the metallic tang of fresh blood. A massive, seemingly invincible armada of the Qing Dynasty emperor is desperately retreating through the churning, unforgiving waves. Their majestic wooden hulls, built to project the absolute divine authority of the Dragon Throne, are splintering under a relentless, deafening barrage of heavy cannon fire. The Imperial Admiral, a man decorated with the highest military honors, a man who has commanded tens of thousands of regular troops, stands on his burning deck, trembling in absolute, unadulterated terror. He is not retreating from the heavily armored frigates of the British Royal Navy. He is not fleeing from the technologically superior cannons of the expanding Portuguese Empire. He is running for his life from a fleet of outlaws, a floating, decentralized nation of desperate criminals that has completely swallowed the horizon. And the supreme commander of this terrifying, unstoppable, apocalyptic armada is not a hardened, battle-scarred military general. She is not a bloodthirsty aristocrat born into maritime royalty. Standing on the heavily reinforced deck of her massive flagship, watching the Imperial Navy burn with cold, deeply calculating eyes, is a woman named Zheng Yi Sao. She wears no golden crown, but she commands absolute, terrifying obedience. She holds no royal mandate, but she is about to bring the greatest, most ancient empire in Asia to its knees. How does this happen? How does a desperately poor woman, a former sex worker operating out of a miserable, disease-ridden floating brothel, become the absolute, undisputed architect of the largest, most powerful, and most successful pirate confederation in the entire history of human civilization? By the height of her reign, she commands a staggering force of 1,800 heavily armed ships and 80,000 ruthless pirates. Let that sink in for a moment. That is a military machine significantly larger, better funded, and more devastatingly efficient than the entire navies of most sovereign nations on Earth at that time. It eclipses the legendary Spanish Armada. It dwarfs the pirate fleets of Blackbeard and Henry Morgan combined. How does a single outcast, a woman born into the absolute crushing bottom of the social hierarchy, shatter the invincible Chinese imperial fleet? How does she force a terrified, immensely proud government to literally beg her for a peace treaty? And here is the greatest, most impossible paradox of this entire dark saga. How does she ultimately retire with a full, unconditional pardon and incomprehensible nation-building wealth, never spending a single day inside a prison cell? To understand this absolute mastermind of maritime domination, we must leave the burning warships, the heavy cannons, and the smoke-filled horizons. We must travel back to the suffocating poverty, the neon-lit desperation, and the brutal reality of the Canton flower boats. Before she is a supreme commander, she is simply a girl born into the crushing, inescapable destitution of 18th century coastal China. She has no money, she has no title, she has no future. She is forced to work in a floating brothel on the Pearl River, entertaining the corrupt merchants, the drunken, violent sailors, and the ruthless underworld figures who navigate the Delta. But while other girls see a floating prison, she sees a masterclass in human psychology and elite networking. She does not just survive the brutality of her environment, she observes it with terrifying precision. She listens to the whispered secrets of global trade routes. She analyzes the drunken, boastful confessions of corrupt government officials. She discovers the hidden financial vulnerabilities of incredibly powerful men. She learns that the ultimate currency of the world is not silver, it is information. When the infamous, incredibly dangerous pirate captain Zheng Yi comes to her brothel, he does not just buy her time, he is entirely captivated by her brilliant, calculating, and terrifying intellect. He offers to marry her, promising to take her away from the floating slums and give her a life of adventure. But she does not accept his proposal, as a desperate, grateful victim looking for a savior. She issues a hard, cold, non-negotiable ultimatum. She demands an equal, contractual share of his entire pirate empire, and she demands equal, unquestioned power over all of his men. He agrees. Together, they unite the fractured, chaotic pirate gangs of the coast into the terrifying, highly organized Red Flag Fleet. But when her husband suddenly dies in a massive typhoon just a few years later, the entire criminal empire threatens to collapse into a bloody, chaotic civil war. Dozens of ruthless captains prepare to slaughter each other to claim the empty throne. She does not panic. She does not flee. She steps directly into the violently unstable power vacuum with a mind that operates like a cold, unforgiving steel trap. She systematically neutralizes her political rivals. She forms a strategic, incredibly brilliant alliance with her husband's adopted son to solidify her unquestioned legitimacy. and she takes absolute, terrifying control of the massive confederation. But she knows a fundamental truth. A disorganized mob of 80,000 violent criminals cannot survive on pure aggression alone. They will eventually tear themselves apart. She needs a machine. She needs a system. She engineers a breathtaking masterpiece of organizational logistics and legal governance. Let us break down the exact anatomy of Zheng Yi Sao's absolute power. Step 1. The Iron Code of Laws. She realizes that internal chaos is the ultimate enemy of long-term profit. She writes a strict, unbreakable, and brutally enforced legal code for her tens of thousands of pirates. If a pirate steals even a single coin from the communal treasury, he is immediately dragged to the deck and beheaded. If a pirate assaults a captive woman, he is violently executed on the spot. No exceptions. If a pirate disobeys a direct operational order in the heat of battle, his ears are sliced off, and he is paraded through the entire fleet as a bleeding, humiliated warning. It is unimaginably brutal, but it creates perfect, terrifying, military-grade discipline. Step 2. The Corporate Financial Syndicate. She transforms piracy from a chaotic system of random, unpredictable looting into a highly sophisticated, standardized corporate monopoly. She sets up a vast, incredibly efficient taxation system across the entire network of coastal villages and port towns. The villages pay her a highly calculated protection fee in silver or grain. In return, her massive, heavily armed fleet actively protects them from other rogue criminals, and, even more shockingly, protects them from the corrupt imperial tax collectors. She even issues official, stamped paper receipts to the villages. She is no longer just a pirate captain. She is actively operating a shadow government with a better credit rating than the emperor. Step 3. The Decentralized Command Structure. She divides her massive, unwieldy armada into 6 distinct color-coded fleets: the red, black, white, blue, yellow, and green fleets. Each specific fleet is assigned its own precise operational zone, its own hand-picked commanders, and its own deeply integrated supply chains. It is not a gang of thieves. It is a highly disciplined, decentralized, multinational military corporation. Other pirates attacked random, isolated merchant ships. Zheng Yi Sao blockaded entire global economic arteries. Other pirates hid in secret, dark coves. Zheng Yi Sao built massive, floating, fortified cities. Other pirates stole scattered chests of silver. Zheng Yi Sao taxed the entire agricultural and commercial output of the Chinese coastline. Think about this for a second. You are standing on the swaying deck of a heavily laden British merchant ship, trying to bring tea and silk back to London. You look through your brass spyglass, and the horizon is literally blackened by a solid, unbroken wall of blood-red sails. 80,000 heavily armed, perfectly disciplined killers are waiting in absolute silence for a single nod from a woman who used to sweep the wooden floors of a Canton brothel. But what does that staggering number actually look like on the ground? It is not just a dry statistic in a forgotten historical ledger. It is the absolute, paralyzing, cold sweat fear of a seasoned imperial general realizing his entire military supply line has simply vanished overnight. It is the hollow, sunken, defeated eyes of a wealthy European merchant being forced to pay a humiliating, exorbitant toll just to sail his own ships in international waters. It is the terrifying mechanical sound of 80,000 iron swords being sharpened simultaneously across 1,000 decks, a rhythm that single-handedly dictates the entire global economy of the South China Sea. The magnificent, ancient Qing Dynasty is not blind to the complete, humiliating collapse of its authority. The emperor sits on the dragon throne and watches his national treasury violently bleed out, while his once proud military forces become an absolute laughingstock in the eyes of the Western powers. He orders the total, unconditional, and merciless annihilation of the Red Flag fleet. The unstoppable force has finally mobilized against the immovable object. The emperor strikes back with the unbridled fury of a wounded, desperate dragon. Attempt 1. The Grand Imperial Armada. The emperor sends a massive, heavily funded fleet of heavily armed military junks to crush her in open water once and for all. But Zheng Yi Sao does not fight like a traditional, predictable naval commander. She fakes a chaotic, panicking retreat. She draws the heavy, cumbersome imperial ships deep into a shallow, treacherous, highly navigated bay, and then unleashes a devastating, perfectly timed ambush from all sides. The imperial fleet is not just defeated, it is completely, systematically assimilated. She captures their pristine ships, forcefully recruits their highly trained sailors, and her pirate fleet actually grows significantly larger using the emperor's own resources. Attempt 2. The European mercenaries. The emperor, deeply humiliated and utterly desperate, opens the imperial vaults and hires the technologically advanced navies of the British and Portuguese empires. He genuinely believes their heavy iron cannons, their superior European ship designs, and their disciplined marines will easily shatter the uneducated pirate confederation. But Zheng Yi Sao does not engage them in a fair, honorable, long-distance artillery fight. She uses her massive, overwhelming numbers to swarm the isolated, heavy European ships. Her fast-moving junks surround the galleons, boarding them with overwhelming, terrifying violence before the heavy European cannons can even manage a second reload. The European navies, bleeding money, losing ships, and watching their men slaughtered by the hundreds, eventually retreat in sheer, bitter frustration. Attempt 3. The apocalyptic fire ships. In a final, desperate, apocalyptic gamble, the Imperial Navy fills dozens of expendable ships with highly combustible explosives. They coat the decks in highly flammable oil, set them entirely on fire, and send them drifting directly into the heart of Zheng Yi Sao's tightly packed, anchored fleet. It is perfectly designed to be a catastrophic, inescapable inferno. But she is a master of logistics, and she has aggressively drilled her men for exactly this scenario. Her pirates do not panic. They calmly row out in small, agile boats, expertly hook the burning ships with long iron poles, violently extinguish the roaring flames, and then, in the ultimate act of disrespect, they add the slightly charred vessels to her own massive armada. The Emperor's ultimate, most destructive weapon is literally absorbed into her endlessly growing machine. The situation reaches the absolute, breaking peak of historical absurdity and global tension. The Chinese government, the British Empire, and the Portuguese Navy have all thrown their absolute best military forces, their heaviest cannons, and their most brilliant admirals at a former sex worker, and she has completely, effortlessly humiliated every single one of them. The Emperor of China realizes a horrifying, paradigm-shifting truth. He simply cannot win. The imperial economy is suffocating to death. The massive coastal population is starving due to the blockades, and the ancient government is teetering on the absolute verge of total, catastrophic collapse. The emperor is forced to do the unthinkable. He swallows his divine pride. He offers the greatest, most destructive pirate in human history a general amnesty. He begs for peace. The trap is seemingly set. Any normal, short-sighted outlaw would suspect a brutal betrayal, take whatever money they could carry, and run for the darkest corners of the globe. But Zheng Yi Sao is a grandmaster of human psychology, and she is already 5 steps ahead of the imperial court. She does not wait for diplomats to come to her. She walks directly into the governor-general's heavily fortified, heavily guarded palace in Canton. She brings no heavy weapons. She brings no heavily armed bodyguard escort. She brings only a small, completely unarmed group of women and children. She walks past hundreds of heavily armed imperial soldiers who want nothing more than to cut her throat. She sits down at the table with the very man who has spent years trying to violently execute her, and she coldly, calmly dictates the absolute terms of her own surrender. If you are captivated by this dark journey into the shadows of history and want to uncover more stories of how individuals completely broke the world order, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel. It fuels our ability to dig deeper and make more intensely researched videos just like this. Now, let us witness the ultimate, most humiliating checkmate in military history. Zheng Yi Sao looks the Governor-General in the eye and demands a full, unconditional, legally binding pardon for herself and nearly all of her 80,000 hardened men. She demands that her pirates be allowed to keep every single ounce of their stolen silver, gold, and looted property. She demands that her top-ranking commanders be immediately given prestigious, high-ranking, heavily salaried jobs within the very Imperial Navy they just spent years actively destroying. And the absolute, most staggering, mind-bending part of this entire historical negotiation? The Chinese government, completely broken and entirely out of options, agrees to every single demand. The Emperor of China is forced to officially, legally recognize her stolen, blood-soaked empire just to make the relentless violence stop. But what is the ultimate, final fate of the supreme commander who brought an ancient dynasty to its knees? What happens to the undisputed, terrifying queen of the maritime underworld? In a twist of profound, deeply dark, and almost comical historical irony, she gets exactly what she always wanted. She does not die gasping for air at the end of a hangman's noose. She does not go down screaming in a blaze of glorious, bloody artillery fire. She simply retires. She keeps her massive, mathematically unimaginable fortune. She moves back to the bustling city of Canton, the very same city where she once worked as a destitute, hopeless captive of a floating brothel. She takes her heavily laundered pirate money and opens an incredibly luxurious, highly profitable, and entirely legal gambling house. She lives a long, incredibly peaceful, and ridiculously wealthy life, completely untouched by the imperial law she once shattered, and quietly dies of old age at the age of 69. She successfully survived the absolute wrath of the Divine Emperor, the heavy cannons of the British Navy, the betrayal of rival pirates, and the treachery of 80,000 criminals, only to peacefully fade away as a legitimate, highly respected, extremely wealthy businesswoman. She left behind a dark, towering legacy, written entirely in stolen silver, cannon smoke, and deeply shattered imperial pride. A terrifying, lingering, and profound testament to an absolute historical truth. The most dangerous, unstoppable force in the world is not a massive, highly trained army or an advanced ironclad warship. It is a brilliant, patient mind that has absolutely nothing